Welcome back to another video tutorial. In today's lesson, I'm going to be teaching you how to create what I like to call twisted art, although it is a popular technique and often referred to as twirl art. I've learned about this technique from Deke McClelland of Deke.com and Lynda.com. If you have not watched his tutorials, then please do yourself a favor and look him up. He is an absolute legend and one of the best instructors for all things related to Photoshop and Illustrator, and has over 20 years worth of tutorials and publications on designing with Adobe products. Also worth mentioning, I was able to successfully create almost identical works using an online and browser-based photo editor called Photopea.com. Let me show you the project we're going to be creating. Here's the results using Photopea.com, and here's the results using Photoshop. The biggest differences between the two is just the document size, and that's just because I made the document in Photoshop 1920 by 1080. The image that I'm going to be using, I grabbed from freeimages.com. From the website, I just searched colorful and found all sorts of really great options. They are free for commercial and personal use, so feel free to go and explore some of the great works that are there. Let's go ahead and open up Photoshop. Create a new document, and I'll make this one 1920 by 1080. Call it Twisted Art. And then the resolution of 600 is more than enough, and then the RGB color mode is appropriate, and then transparent background is fine. Go ahead and choose Create. Bring in my image, and I'm going to stretch this out to match that of the document size. Let me center that. Now the reason I went with this is because there's color that stretches across the entire span of the image. There's some nice negative space or white space, nice shadows, and then some dark and light colors. So I felt this one works really well. For the most part, what we're going to be doing in this lesson is exploring smart objects and then mashing up filters with the versatility and the endless options that smart options offer. So if your image is not already a smart object, go ahead and convert it to one. You can right click on your layer and then go to convert to smart object. Mine already is, I don't have to do that. I'll go ahead and change my name to colors1. And we're going to go ahead and apply our first filter. The first filter I'm going to be using is that of a blur effect, and it's going to be the radial blur. And we're going to make several passes of this radial blur, so to keep things as efficient as possible, the first couple of passes that we're going to be doing and the first couple of times we apply this effect, we're going to be using that of a draft quality. That's going to make working with this image a lot faster and much easier overall. If we were to start using the best quality, every single time that we apply that effect, it's going to make the image and the effect more complex, and as it becomes more complex, it's going to slow down being able to work with the image and render. So we're going to keep this at draft quality. I'm going to change the blur method to zoom, and then I'm going to increase this to 100%. Click OK, and that looks great, although we do have a lot of noise and grain going on. Don't worry about that. We'll clean that up with the last pass of the effect in the best quality. So we're going to go back to our filter and then use the automatically generated radial blur that's on the top here, and then that's everything that we want, so just choose OK. And then one more time back to radial blur, but we're going to change it from the draft quality down to best quality. And now that cleans up our lines and gets rid of all of that grain. We have a smart filter over here. We're not going to need that, so we're going to delete that filter mask. Okay, so now that we have the texture and the bands of color that we want, the next thing that we're going to be doing is creating the pattern and shape that we're going to be working with. To do that, we're going to go to the filter menu and then go to distort, and then we're going to choose twirl. And the way that this effect works is as you drag the slider to the right and increase the value, what's going to happen is the image is going to spin and twist clockwise, and that can get really intense. So go ahead and adjust and experiment and create the effect that you want. But if you go to the opposite direction and slide to the left, what happens is the image spins counterclockwise. And again, you can make that as intense as you want it to be. What I'm going to be doing is choosing a value of 80. And that's going to give me a subtle yet very impactful effect and design. And now what we want to do is we want to get some contrast throughout our image as well. And a great way to do that is to, and it won't look obvious at first, but we're going to use an effect to get the contrast we want, and then we're going to bring it into a different order in our layer order over here to achieve a smoother transition of the effect and get rid of the overly pixelated style that this effect will have. Let me go ahead and show you how that works. If we go to Filter and then go to Pixelate and then go to Mezzotint, you see here that it's creating an effect that is not desirable at all. It's too intense, it's spotty, it's pixelated, it's all over the place. That's not what we want to do. But what we're going to be doing is applying it, gaining the contrast that this effect has, and then changing the layer order in order to achieve the look that we want. So we're going to drop this down and then go to, I'm going to choose long lines. You can choose long strokes or coarse dots, whatever you want, explore. But I'm going to choose long lines because I want to continue these lines that I have in these strokes and bands of color. So I want to further enhance that effect that I have going on. I'm going to choose OK, and immediately you can see that this is not the effect that we want. Maybe you like it. It is a neat effect, a cool effect, but this is not what I want for this image and this composition. I want this to be all consistent and smooth transitions in tone and color. So to achieve the look that I want, I'm going to drag the Mezzotint filter down to the bottom. Now you can drag it to other locations. I've explored and I've tried this a few times, so I found that the Mezzotint being on the bottom for this particular composition and this particular image, and it may not apply if you're using a different picture, it might not apply the same way. So explore and place this elsewhere in the layer stack here. But for my image, it works best on the bottom. So now that I have, for the most part, the image the way that I want it to look, what we have to do now is duplicate this image and then create an opposite effect and an opposite pattern to then create some symmetry. So you can either use the keyboard shortcut of Control or Command J, or you can right click and go to Duplicate Layer. I'm going to call this Colors 2. And then what we need to do is we need to change the direction of the twisting or twirling effect. So to do that, we go back to Twirl, and then we just make that directly opposite of what we have. So instead of positive 80, we're going to a negative 80, and that's going to keep the image incredibly symmetrical. Great. Now all we have to do is, now that we have the symmetry and the images the way that we want them, is we have to blend them together. And of course we just drop down and use our blending modes. And the one that I'm most likely going to use, and I'll experiment again, is most likely going to be Multiply. Multiply is a little bit intense, and it does bring through a lot of the contrast between the two images together, but I happen to like the way that that looks. But go ahead and try all of them to see what works best for your image. So if you were to just drop down and start scrolling through and cycling through, you can just take a look at seeing which one brings the two layers together in the best possible way to make this image look best. So keep on going through. The overlay looks good. Soft light looks great. Hard light looks okay. Linear light, not bad. Pin light is creating a really interesting effect where it seems to be almost like weaving in and out the two different layers. So these lines are kind of like weaving back and forth. Really cool effect. Difference is incredibly psychedelic. I like the way that looks, although it's not what I want for this. It's a little bit too dark for my liking for this particular composition. You might like it though. Exclusion is really nice. The luminosity is not bad. But again, I do like the multiply the most, so I'm going to stick with that. I happen to like the way that this creates almost these pedal looking extensions and movement throughout the image. So I like this one the most. And now all that's left to do is just continue to explore. Maybe you want to change the mezzotint from that of, oh, I've got this option or this dialog message popped up saying the smart filter stacked on top of this filter will not preview while the filter is being edited. And that's fine. We won't even have the ability to preview this anyway. There's no preview available for this particular filter, so click OK. And so maybe you didn't want long lines. Maybe you wanted to use something like medium lines or grainy dots. And so go ahead and just try different options and see what works better for your composition. And the grainy dots creates too much of the effect and it becomes too busy, so I don't happen to like that very much, but it might work better for your composition. You might like that more. Try changing around the layer order. Try turning things on and off and see where you're starting to get the most color and the best overall composition. I happen to like that more. I turned off the third radial blur here, and then I'll turn off the second here and see what that looks like. I like that a lot. So I'm getting some lighter tones to be a little bit more saturated, and I like that effect. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching my tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.